to Paul, who's going to talk, and we will leave some time for questions at the very end.
Sure.
And then we have some treats in the back for after. So,
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Mike. I'm with St. Vincent de Paul. In fact, I'm the president of Holy Family Conference here in town, and I'll explain what that means in a little bit. But I'd like to start out just talking about poverty in general. Okay, who do we serve? Well, one of the things I think we all try to do is that we try to lump everybody into one group. In our minds, it's just so easy to think of things that way. But in truth, people in poverty are a great mix of people. It's all different types. For example, one of the larger groups that we work with are the working poor. People in poverty, when they're working, tend to not work in the same manner that the rest of us do, in the sense that they may not work all year round. Because a lot of times they're the last hired and first fired for various reasons. They may be working in a position like fast food, where they get part-time hours. They're trying to get more hours, but they don't. And even then, when you look at the salaries that are paid, even if it's a full-time position, and say they're making $10 an hour, think about that. If it's a single person, well, $20,000 a year for a single person is not making you rich by any means. If they have children, then it puts them into poverty right away. Retail work is another example. Wages at retail level is very, very limited, and so the working poor is one significant group that we have. Another significant group that we work with are people that are either mentally disabled or physically disabled. So just those two groups together make up well over half of the people that we serve. Then you get into other groups that we get involved with. You get a lot of generational issues, single parents with a number of children, many times, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 children. And what they run into many times is that they want to work, but with the family structure that they have, they are unable to work because there isn't adequate child care. There really isn't any child care facilities that run evenings and night shifts, which is a lot of times what workers in poverty are offered. So especially if it's a little bit better paid job, like in one of the factories. So a lot of times those individuals simply can't work because they can't afford it. There's no way for them to get the child care that they need. If they use family members, well, family members are not going to always be available because they have their own lives and issues to deal with. And so that's part of why when you go to the employment side, if they are working, a lot of times they'll be working for a while, and all of a sudden they have to miss work because they have to stay home with their kids. And so poor attendants often is the reason that they lose their jobs if they get a little bit better job, and it puts them back into the, can't make their bills like the way that they would like to. So that's another significant group that we have. Think about it, if somebody grows, I just had a group of 3 young folks that I worked with. They just graduated from high school this year. It was a guy and 2 girls, and it's kind of interesting. They're living, it's almost like a dormitory situation. But anyway, the guy, he left his mother's home, there's no dad around, so because she is a drug user. And so he graduated from high school. He hopes to go on to university. He actually was a pretty good student in school, but he has no resources whatsoever. He doesn't know how really to reach out and get the resources that would be available to him financial aids and things of that nature. And so he has no model to work from. One of the girls, she's 18, so anyway, the young lady, the one lady there, she was physically, sexually abused by her mother's boyfriend who lived in the house. And so she moved out into this situation to get away from that. And she's working now at one of the local fast food places. The third individual is in a very similar situation. Her mother is a drug addict, also alcoholic, and she wanted to get away from it. So they're trying to improve their lives, but yet they don't really have the resources to do that. It's very difficult when even with 3 people with minimal incomes. And of course, let's start with the guy again. He was working this summer through a temp agency, and of course then he would work for a few weeks, and then that job would end, and he'd go to a different job, and then that job would end. Well, now he was starting at Popeyes, so, the new restaurant in town, so he's hopeful that that's going to last. So this is, you see this a lot when you work with people in poverty. They move from job to job, etc. So then another group of people that we see are in fact the people that have various addictions, whether it's alcohol addictions, other types of drug addictions. So you have that group that's out there. And then finally you have the homeless. Okay, and they are the hardest people to help in many ways because their difficulty is most challenging of all. And even that group is it's quite varied. It can be the mother that's living in her car with a child or maybe a pet. The homeless shelter, for example, the warming shelter, the Salvation Army runs and just opened up here at the beginning of November, does not allow anyone with children or does not allow anyone with pets. And if all you have is your car, well then that's what they live in. A lot of the homeless people move from home to home. I'm sure you heard that last week with this school presentation. And in fact, that's really probably the most common setting for people that are homeless, is that they live with this friend for a little while, and then they go and they move again, and they live with another friend until they can't do that anymore. So one of the issues that they run into, like you hear about the ID issue, well, imagine the family or the person that has lived in maybe 4 or 5 addresses over the course of the year. How do you keep up with a current ID? It's not easy to do. Okay, well, the government does allow you to get one once. If you move, that's it. Too bad. No longer have a valid ID, you can't even vote anymore. So that's another situation that comes up, is because they move very often. They get a job, they get into an apartment, and they make an arrangement to make the payments. They think they're going to afford this, and all of a sudden the employer tells them, well, we don't need you anymore. And they're out of work. They can't meet their payments on their apartment, and pretty soon they're evicted, and now they're homeless. So it gets to be a real challenge. And to get into another place, well, now they have a record of not making your payments, an eviction record, and so it gets to be harder. So now instead of having to put 1 month's deposit down on the next apartment, they have to put 2 months' deposit down on that apartment. And of course, to save that money up to do that is really a challenge. So that gives you a little picture of who it is that we're working with. So now back to just St. Vincent de Paul. So who are we really? Well, for many people, of course, I see a lot of familiar faces here. We have a number of people that are either working in St. Vincent de Paul or in various roles, or people that have been with us in the past. So anyway, St. Vincent de Paul, most of you certainly would understand and think about the store. Well, the store is the engine that drives us. It really is. And Aaron did such a good job here with the bulletin, and put out some of our statistics. One of the statistics that I wanted to share is, it says here that we gave $280,600 of assistance. This is just our conference. And that's not counting what the store directly gives to people in clothing, furniture, and things of that nature, which puts it up actually over $300,000 in the last fiscal year. So, and we helped 5,795 individuals, and we responded to 2,672 calls for assistance. Okay, so the store, like I say, is the engine that drives us. Also, one of the listed things in there is that we received $22,000 from Holy Family Parish, which is wonderful. We're very happy to receive that. But you can see, compared to the $300,000 in assistance that we gave, that's a very small portion. So the store is really where we get most of our money. Luckily, we have a very successful store, and that enables us to really help in most cases, at least to some extent. Of course, we have to have our rules and how often we help people and to what level. The most common type of help that we give is to one-time calling. That is the most common individual or family, once in a year or 2 years. And we don't really keep records beyond 2 years. So if somebody comes back 3 or 4 years after they've been helped previously, we consider them a new person. We have other people that ask for help periodically, and that would be the second most common group. And you look at our total list of people that we help. But not often. They might come and call once or twice in a year, and we do what we can to help them as well. Then the third group, which is the smallest group, are the people that are needing help all the time. Some of those individuals call for help every month. We cannot help them every month. It's just not, we just can't do that. But nevertheless, they're in such a situation that they have a need all the time. And depending on their circumstances, they may know that there's rules that they have to follow, that they can't call in constantly. But maybe they don't remember that, or they maybe think that, well, I'll get help this time anyway. So their circumstances are the most challenging, that's for sure. And that oftentimes includes the homeless. That oftentimes includes people that have addictions, or people with really large families that just can't make ends meet. So that's the group of people that we're helping. But St. Vincent de Paul, we have different levels of assistance that's out there. For example, we have people that simply help in our store. Okay, volunteers. Our store has many volunteers, all the way from youth that are getting in their hours of community service, you might say, to retired people that are helping out. The store never has enough people to volunteer there. We do have hired staff, and part of the issue on that is that we have to have certain jobs done. We have to run the cash registers. We have to have people that work at the back taking in donations, things of that nature. We just have to have that, and it has to be available all the time. It's great when somebody volunteers, but if somebody doesn't want to volunteer late in the afternoon, well, then that means they won't be there at closing time, or towards the end of the day when donations are still coming in. And somebody has to be at that door to welcome people and so on. So that's the store situation. Well, then we also have our call center. And the call center operates Monday through Friday from 10 to 4. And we have about 40 different people that volunteer to work in that area. But again, we always can use more. People volunteer for 2-hour shifts. in the call center. Then we have our people that go out and actually visit individuals in their homes. Okay, we have actually between 60 and 70 people that do that, and they're the ones that are visiting the 2,000 and some individuals or families that have called in for help. But we're the one organization that actually goes out and sees people in their homes, in their apartments. Although it's getting less, because we're seeing more and more homeless people. You can't see them in their home if they're homeless. So they come to our store for a visit, or we meet them at the library, or some other public place in the community where we can meet them. So the number of home visits is about half of the people that call in for help. Approximately 25% of the people that call in for help we see in face-to-face in these other settings that are not in their home, because for various reasons. Even some people that have an apartment, for whatever reason, they would prefer to be seen at our store. Maybe what they're asking for is a gift certificate from our store. So, like for some furniture or some clothing or something like that. So they would just as soon be right there at the store, so they can shop at that point, when the visit is done. So that's 75% of the people altogether that we see is face-to-face. The other people, some we can handle simply with a phone call. Okay, maybe somebody that we've seen before, and we know quite a bit about their circumstances, and there's just one additional thing that we need to talk to them about. So they've called in for that one thing, and so we help them with that over the phone. And some of the other phone calls are people that we actually have to turn down. They're the ones that we've helped maybe just recently, and we cannot help them again because of our own guidelines. Or they simply, they're just looking for information. That's the other thing that happens. Where do I get such and such? So a lot of times we're just providing information. So that's the people that we're serving in the most common ways. Then we have some more in-depth type of assistance that's out there. And just looking at Carissa, our Getting Ahead director is not here. She had said she was going to be here this morning, but apparently not. So Getting Ahead is a program that we have where we work in much greater depth with people that are in poverty. Okay, it's usually a small group. It's anywhere from 3 to 7 or 8 people it's been, and we're about I think our 7th group that's going through this program now. So we've been running it for a while. Jack over here, Jack Brown, was our former director, and he has since retired recently, earlier this year from that position at least. And so at that we've been running sessions anywhere from 16 to 20 weeks with a small group of people, trying to teach them, or not just teach them, trying to get them to understand better ways of getting out of the situation that they're in, whether it's learning about mentoring, about what is expected in a job situation, just managing their home situation better so that they can actually be out in the community to a greater degree. Those are some of the kinds of things that happen in this Getting Ahead program. And it's really spreading in the community. We've started to offer some sessions, through Forward Services that runs the Food Share and W2 programs. They've been using it. We're looking at starting it up with some of the Solution Center facilities in town. And so that's a program that we're definitely emphasizing with just a few people that are really, really trying to get out of their current current situation. We just had a graduation last week from that program. So several individuals that went through the whole program, graduated from it, and are now hoping to move on in their lives and have a better situation going forward. We have another program where we work with ex-inmates called the Circle of Success. And that is actually quite similar to the Getting Ahead program, but except for the fact that people have to be former inmates. And we usually work with probation and parole to get people into that program that need a little bit of a boost and getting started and staying out of jail or prison. And so that's another significant group that we have. And the one big difference between the Getting Ahead and the Circle of Success is also the fact that in the Getting Ahead program, virtually all the people that have been part of it have children that they are involved with, that they have to watch over. And they actually can come to the Getting Ahead meetings, have child care, get a meal, and so on. But again, they have the children. That's a big issue for them. With the ex-inmates that we work with, whether they have children or not, they usually do not have custody of the children. So in a way, they have a better chance of getting ahead than the others do, because it's just themselves that they have to worry about a lot of times. Plus, they have the extra motivation that if they do not get employment and get themselves going quickly, they're going to go back to jail or prison. Because a lot of times, that is a requirement, and part of their parole rules is that they have to be employed quickly. So the biggest issue with them is finding places to live. We have this wonderful list of landlords, and this is true for people in poverty in general. And these landlords are willing to place individuals into their apartments and houses that they have. The catch is there's not enough of them. There's a lot of new apartments going up in Fond du Lac. They're not apartments that people in poverty can afford. You know, if you have a new apartment I was just in an apartment on the south side of Fond du Lac, it was $1,100 a month. Well, if somebody's total income for the month is $631, which was a client's income that I talked to just a few days ago, there's no way they can afford an apartment that's $1,100. So and they've got to pay for their food, they've got to pay for any expenses they have. Transportation is an issue. We have bus service in town, but it only runs Monday through Friday and from early in the morning till 6 at night. Well, what if you work at night? What if you wanted to work at, say, Clyde Graphics, or Alliance, Laundry, any of those places that are out of town that hire and pay good wages? Well, how do you get there? It's hard to do if you don't have any transportation. So that's an example of who we are and what we provide to people. But the most important thing of all is that we're actually there for the people. We're providing a spiritual opportunity for these individuals. Now, some of them are very involved in churches that they participate in. Some of them not so much. So they at least know where this is coming from. That we believe that it is God that is calling us to go out and help people. And so even if we couldn't solve their problem, we at least showed them some friendship and a handout with a little bit of something that might make it a little bit easier for them. So that's what I have to say about our organization and the people that we work with. If you have any questions, I'm more than willing to answer anything that you have. At least try.
You had said that they can only talk to you periodically, and then they're turned down. Why is that?
Well, partly partly is the actual the number of staff that we have, or volunteers that we have. We can only get out to see so many people. So that's one of the things. We've had, I think the most I ever heard, I had one of our visitors that went out to see 17 individuals or families in a week. Well, you just can't expect volunteers to do that, okay? That's one of the reasons why, even though we have large numbers of volunteers, we always need more. Plus, there's limited resources. I mean, the store is a wonderful resource and it's almost always able to help us. But that's only true because we do put limits on how much help can be provided. So,
What is the partners you work with, or who you refer people to? Other agencies?
okay, yeah, good question. Well, of course, we work very closely with a number of agencies in town, but the main ones that we work with are Salvation Army. We make referrals back and forth. Lately, we've been hearing Salvation Army is out of money for new clients for the rest of the year. So they make referrals to us. We don't so much make referrals to them at this point, except for the warming shelter. They can keep running the programs they have. Solution Center is another one. They run a facility for people that have been in abused relationships. It used to be the women's shelter. There really isn't a women's shelter at this point. It's to get into that facility, a person has to have been in an abusive situation. And so they can take in some individuals there, and otherwise, anybody living in that setting, by the way, is considered homeless. Because they don't have their own permanent site. They can only stay there, I think 90 days is the normal program that they have right now, maximum. And they may vary that a little bit, but that's the Solution Center facility for people that have been abused. Then they have a men's facility, which at this time houses 14 men. That is on 2nd Street, and anyway, that facility looks like it's going to be changing in the near future. It looks like instead of being a men's facility, it's going to be a facility for families. Solution Center used to have a facility for families that only housed 2 families, but it was part of the flood that happened this spring, and they had to close it down. They don't have funds enough to refurbish that facility to get it back up to speed so that it can be housing a family or families again. But no, the men's facility actually is larger than that one was. So they can actually get probably 5 or 6 families in the men's, what is now the men's facility. They're hoping to do that soon. But what happens to the men then? Well, they will be homeless again. But again, they were already classified as homeless because they could only stay there up to 90 days. So they'll be back now because there's the warming shelter from the Salvation Army. Those men will probably be moving over to the warming shelter if they choose. Most likely, that's where most of them will end up. Although it is an interesting thing with people that are homeless, some of them choose not to even go to a warming shelter when it's available because the warming shelter or any other facility like this has its own rules too, and they sometimes cannot comply with those rules. But if they were in the men's shelter, they had rules anyway, so most of those will probably go over to the warming shelter. But that's just for the winter months. That closes in the spring. So then we're hoping, beyond hope, that we can get involved with running our own shelter or facility for the homeless. In the future, we're actively working with Salvation Army and the Solution Center seeking a property where we can actually run it year-round. And the big issue is just finding a place that the city approves, and because the three organizations actually have worked out an agreement where we are willing to work together, which is very unique that we would be able to do that. We might be the first in the country that's ever had that type of a working relationship together. We recently had sign off on a memorandum of agreement between these three organizations. So, so the Solution Center, Salvation Army, Advocap is another organization. They write a lot of grants, either state grants or federal grants, and they help people in poverty with the grants, all different types of grants, sometimes to help people that are homeless. And they have government guidelines they have to go by because of these grants. So just to give you an idea, that if we put somebody up in a motel, which we do on occasion, they're not homeless. Even if we only put them up for one night. They actually have to be out on the street or living. They can live in one of the homeless facilities, the Solution Center facilities, and they can still be considered homeless. But if they had a roof over their head last night, they're not homeless according to the rule. So if they actually slept in a park or in a parking ramp or under a tree or in a cardboard box or in their car, then they're homeless. Okay, so Advocate helps them with that. Then they have programs, just to give you an idea, they have programs to help with renovations of housing facilities, apartments, etc. So people that are in poverty might get some repairs done on their home, for example, because of that program. And then there's another one called Wheels to Work, where cars can be repaired. So Advocate runs a variety of programs, and they're always writing grants for those types of things. Plus, we work with the Family Resource Center on things like getting diapers and formula and those types of things for young families that can't afford the diapers that they need and that. And New Beginnings is another organization for people that are, for women that are pregnant or have just young children. And so we work with that organization as well. So those are the main organizations that we work with, plus the churches. And Caring. Caring is another organization. It's a whole group of churches in town, mostly Protestant, although we have Holy Family and St. Vincent de Paul involved with them too. In fact, right here, Aaron is one of the volunteers with them, and they're taking calls for assistance. And they'll sometimes pick up where we leave off. So, for example, if we help somebody with some money towards their rent, maybe the Caring organization can help with that last little piece to make it actually work, because we couldn't pay enough of that bill to keep them in their apartment. So those are the main organizations I would say that we've worked with. And then individual churches too sometimes step up that we've worked with in the past. Okay. Yes?
Mike, maybe this is a loaded question. I'll let you deal with that.
Sure.
How would you define success for St. Vincent Paul? Is it raising more money? Is it more customers, less customers, more visits, less visits? What is the ultimate measure?
Okay, I measure it in the fact that we're out there, that we're actually able to help people when they ask for help. We don't solve their problems either. I mean, that's not who we are. We're a charity that helps them get closer to solutions is what we do. And as long as we can keep doing that, that's great. But for example, if let's say we get a facility, a homeless facility, that we're able to buy actual property that we can get people into. no matter how many people that would house, there'll always be more. Because they just keep coming. And people look at the unemployment rate and say, well, gee, we have 3% unemployment, and there's signs all over the place. Why don't they just go out and ask, get a job? Well, from what I told you earlier, a lot of times this population can't get employed that easily. There can be a big sign out front, they can go in and apply for the job and they don't get it because of various factors that have worked against them. But yeah, for success for us, I think it's just being able to help the vast majority of people that call and ask for help. That's what success looks like. And reaching out into as many different directions as we can and constantly looking for new opportunities to help. Hey, we're called by Scripture. It's amazing this fall. You listen to the Scriptures, and week after week after week, Scripture tells us that we have to be helping those people. Read the Beatitudes. It's so easy for people to throw, it's wonderful when people can take a little bit of cash and throw it in the collection box or send a little money our way. But in truth, what these people need is they need people contact. They really do. And we provide that, but there's never enough people to do that. And a lot of times I think people think, well, okay, I did my share. I donated my dollars to that account, and now I can go on with my life. And they don't realize what a different world these people are living in. And we get into these apartments, and it's amazing what they're like. There may not be one piece of furniture. Or if there is furniture, what is that furniture like? Well, it's like the stuff you would probably be ashamed to have out on your curb. I remember going into one apartment, that one guy, he wanted a chair. And because all he had for furniture was, it looked like a broken stool. Well, come to find out, it was a broken living room chair. The back was completely broken off. The two arms were completely broken off. And the springs were coming through the seat. And he was so grateful that he could get a chair from us. And that was it. That was all he was asking for. And you could look, he had a one-bedroom apartment and then his living room, kitchenette. And I could see into his bedroom. Of course, he had his blankets laying on the floor because he had no bed whatsoever. And, this is what we see. Now, some people, on the other extreme, even though they're living in poverty, they have the cleanest place ever, they don't have it, much in the way of resources, but they're going to make what they have the best they can. Other places you get into, you can see there must be issues with things like mental health, etc. They can't take care of what they have. They just can't. So we're at least offering help on some little thing that will make their life better.
I just want to reiterate what you said about helping. Money is great. We always take money, but I think they really need volunteers to make that contact with the people out there. I think that is probably your biggest need always is volunteers.
It is. And all three levels that I talked about, really the 4 levels, for the store, for our call center, for our visitors, and for those specific programs like the Getting Ahead and the Circle of Success. All of those programs could use more volunteers.
Even just 2 hours a week, right?
That's right. Yes?
What kind of training do you provide for those different volunteer roles?
Well, it depends which role you're talking about. But usually, for example, I'll use the call center as an example. What we do is we set you down with an experienced person and partner up with them side by side, watch them for a while, and then gradually start to take the calls yourself and the information that is needed, and then, but with somebody right there coaching, and then eventually taking it on your own.
What about for the Getting Ahead program?
For the Getting Ahead program, again, we have mentors that are volunteers with the program, and they gradually come in, and we have they can start out with a general training session about what the program is about. But we do have paid staff that runs the program and leads the program, at least, and they can provide the training. Maybe Jack, you can say more about that for like the Getting Ahead program.
Mostly it's all pretty much run by volunteers. So the mentoring is a big part of it that we try to get established. We have volunteers who do meals. So it might be 2 people, it might be 4 people. You feed maybe between 15 to 20 people because, as Mike said, it might be 3 to 8 in the program, but they each have 2 to 3 children. You have 2 child care providers. You have your 4 people providing a meal. You might have 3 facilitators. So it really becomes a social event. You provide a meal, you share the meal with them, and you get to know the people as well. If you want interested in facilitating it, that's all online training. It's all provided by the National St. Vincent de Paul. The program is a national program. It's called AHA Process, Bridges Out of Poverty. So nationally is where the collaboration was to run the Getting Ahead program. So there's child care providers are always looking for those people as well.
Usually there's not a lot of preparation if you want to do for example, food preparation. You know, if you wanted to prepare a meal for this group, I mean, there's not a lot of training, I should say, for that. You know, if you know how to make meals and that, then you can probably handle that. And the child care is just normal child care. And like you said, for the actual mentors in the program, there is training available. It's national training as well. And for our visitors, by the way, the training is usually going along with experienced visitors, and that's how it's done. Although we do have some more organized training that we provide periodically as well. Yes?
So are we better to donate to particular shelters or to St. Vinny's?
Any or all. The shelters, of course, then it's limited to that particular facility, which is fine. But with St. Vincent, we're touching lots of bases. So I guess that's how I would look at it. Depends what level you want to help with. That's where I guess you have to decide that.
Yeah, another piece of volunteering for St. Vinny's, a lot of people are hesitant because they think they need to know who all the resources are in the community. You don't need to do that. You learn that as you go. And it's amazing how much we learn from the clients. They're the ones who tell us, hey, go here for resources and those kind of things. So you never have to worry about that fear of not knowing everything, of having to know everything about the community. You'll learn that right through your visits.
That's an interesting aspect, because no matter how much training you've had, or when you actually encounter a client and you're on your own for the first time, you'll run into something that you were never trained for. It's inevitable. That seems to be the way it works. But it's not a big deal, really, because then you just call somebody else that's in the organization and say, well, what do we do in this situation? Or this client needs this, and I never heard that need before. What do we do? Well, we'll figure it out. And then sometimes the answer is we can't help in that area because it's just outside of what we can do. Yes.
Mike, do you see any institutional barriers in our community to helping the homeless and poverty? I know there's the social justice aspect. I get all that, and God bless the people that are involved in this. But are there things as a community that get in our way of doing this, and where are the resistance points? Because you can make the argument that we could be too good at that.
I would say that generally we get very good cooperation from the various levels of government in the and from community leaders as well. But yes, there are obstacles, for example, in this search for a property for a shelter, for a homeless shelter. The city has stood in our way with a number of facilities that we've looked at. They put up obstacles that we have some difficulty in understanding at times. So it goes both ways. Generally, they're very cooperative and have been helpful in trying to give us a helping hand here and there, but at the same time, they've also stood in our way. Depends on the issue. Okay.
Well, thank you so much for coming today and
Sure.
sharing. Again, my husband's willing to stay. We'll be in the back. We'll have some treats back there if you want to come and have a treat, some coffee. And I'm sure Mike will be happy to talk with you if you're interested in volunteering or have any additional questions that you want to ask.
Right.
Thank you all for coming.